So this one's tricky. We have several questions today. The main kind of topic here is about hominy and what it really is and what their hominy would have been like in the 18th century. Thanks for joining us today on Questions and Answers with James Townsend and Son. This question came in on the Ship's Biscuit episode. This is Comet Moon. It says, I saw this video after seeing the how to make an oven video, became intrigued. Just flour, water, and salt? I might make these in the future. Can these be made even smaller, 1.5 inches or 2 inches across? And also, what about adding ground herbs to make them more flavorful? Or would the herbs make them burn? So there's some implied questions here. You definitely could make these smaller if you wanted to, and there's obviously nothing wrong with that. Generally, the Ship's Biscuits were kind of a particular size. That's why we made them the size we made them. As for putting the ground herbs in them, this type of food it's not really meant to be eaten like it is. You know, it's sort of like an ingredient for something else. And so generally they're putting other things with it. They wouldn't want to mix herbs with that because then you might not be able to use it in different contexts. So some people would just soak these in their coffee or, in some other kind of liquid and use them in a different way than at other times they might put them in a stew, where you might not mind the herbs in the stew, but you certainly would in your coffee. So you want these basically, they made them as bland as possible. And that's why generally you don't see other things being added to them. Here's a question. It's from is it the worst recipe ever? The one with the salted smelt. This is GSP0133. I'm sure this recipe would work well with earthworms too. Please consider making a video. I don't think so. Here's another one that came in on the hardtack episode. This one's Abel Jimenez. He says, do you guys sell a cookbook that has lots of your recipes? We have multiple cookbooks. We have like these that are available on our website. Generally, we have reprints of period cookbooks. There are some kind of collection cookbooks that are on our website that have been interpreted. We don't have a specific cookbook for the recipes that we have done. We're kind of working on something like that in the future, but we don't have anything available yet. We also have this great link. I'm going to put it down in the description section. It goes to our blog, our cooking blog, and there's an article that has links to lots of free online cookbooks that you can see that are from the 18th and early 19th century. And if you're interested in looking at those original recipes, that is a great resource, so make sure to check that out. So the main question today, or maybe I should say questions, have to do with the hominy in the Journey Cakes episode. Here's Galen Long. Does it matter what type of hominy you use, white or yellow? No, it's not going to matter which one you're going to use. And then here's Kyle Breen. Love the videos, John. Keep up the great work. A quick question. If I'm unable to find hominy, would canned corn be a feasible substitute? Or what about cornmeal? Thanks. There was another one that mentioned the idea of creamed corn. So in this context, if you can't find hominy, go with cornmeal, not canned corn, definitely not creamed corn. I don't think that would work out well at all. Bob Spencer has a really good comment that gets to this question here a little bit further, and I'll comment after that. Here's Bob Spencer. Dealing with hominy in old literature can be confusing. The actual meaning of the word evolved or changed over time, so you can't always be certain of what you're discussing. Early on, the term, as used by the Native Americans, wasn't lye-treated corn as we know it, but rather dried corn soaked to soften it, crushed in a hominy mortar, and then boiled for several hours to a sort of a gruel. Since Harriet Pinckney Horry, the author that we used for that recipe, stated in her recipe by saying, take hominy cold, could it possibly be that she meant making hominy in that way, in other words, grinding it up and boiling it for several hours, cooling it, and then making the cakes? I immediately, this comment kind of caught me off guard. I wasn't ready for it, and it made me go to the books immediately and do just a little bit of digging. And I found a particular reference in a letter that was in a book that was the Collected Letters of George Whitefield. And here's a little letter, and it actually has hominy in it. And I'm going to just cut into the middle of it here. No New York vessels have come to this province of late. We live entirely within ourselves, except for the few necessities that we cannot do without and that we're obliged to purchase elsewhere. Twice a day we eat hominy, of our own raising, and at the present without molasses. For dinner we eat beef of our own stock, and peas for bread. Of all that we have plenty, and we shall have for 3 months to come. And the collector of these letters actually put an asterisk by hominy, and he comes down here at the bottom and he says, Indian corn boiled up thick with water. And by that reference, he means something like hasty pudding. And if you go to it was like the first cooking episode we did, I took cornmeal and made it into a hasty pudding. And the author of this book that collected these letters thinks that when Whitefield mentions hominy, he actually means a hasty pudding made with cornmeal. And that kind of makes sense, especially with this reference to not having the molasses. So it's a really good question. I actually dug into a book that had about the history of corn. And in it, the author of that book, mentions that all the Native Americans actually treated their corn with lye to make it much easier to process. Both process mechanically to grind it and to actually digest it. And whether or not they knew they needed it for digestion, I don't know, but it seems that almost every Native American culture used lye in treating their corn. So they quite likely realized that they needed that lye in there to properly digest it. But the North Americans, or not the North Americans, but the Europeans that came into the North American area, they thought that the lye was just there purely to mechanically treat the corn. They could use mills and other grinding method to mechanically process the corn. And so many times they got rid of the lye process and they just ground up the corn. But they would still call it hominy, at least in theory. So sometimes the references in the 18th century mean hominy that's treated with lye, and quite possibly it might just refer to using cornmeal as the Europeans would. It's a really difficult question to answer exactly what was meant in any particular reading of hominy in the 18th century. Might mean one thing, might mean another. If you want a little more information on that, we got this book in our library. It's called The History of Corn by Betty Fusel, I think here is her name. And it's got a great little section on hominy itself and understanding what it meant in the 18th century. There's still a lot more to learn about that. I'm still learning more about this, and hopefully we'll cover hominy in a greater sense when we do a particular hominy episode where we go ahead and make it. So I really want to thank everyone. Great comments, very encouraging comments, and wonderful questions. Keep them coming. I can't answer every one of them, but I read every one of them, and it helps me know what people have questions about as we make content into the future. And I want to thank you, everyone out there, for sharing our videos. That is a tremendous way of supporting this channel. If you haven't subscribed, it's a great time to subscribe to this channel. We've got lots of great content coming up, and you don't want to miss it. Thank you, everyone, for your great comments, your wonderful questions, and thanks for watching.
Hi, I'm Michelle Souza, and I'm a costume designer currently living in Terre Haute, Indiana. I'm on faculty at Indiana State University. I formally, about a year ago, left a job after working for 8 years at the Old Globe Theater in San Diego. And we often did big shows with big casts, and we had to put clothes on them. So this was always kind of our go-to place when we were doing period shows. So we had a great relationship, and I'm sure continue to have a great relationship with this company. So I had to stop here just to put faces with names, and got the grand tour of the place. It's really amazing to see what these guys are doing here. Had a great time.